I think it is. It says it's on air, so I think I'm in a good spot. What I'm going to do, what I've done is I've sent a link to everybody so they know where they have access to the very same PowerPoint that I set up, but I'm going to also make it so you can all see it on mine. All right. So you actually have access to the video that I'm making, but if you scroll up, you'll see a link that's just to the PowerPoint. So this is the PowerPoint. Everybody who's on Google Hangout should have it. I've definitely put in each of you individually. I actually created a circle for you that says PD Hangout group. And anyways, so we're going to go ahead and jump into it very quickly. Our agenda today, if it lets me do it, is we're going to do some updates from the CDE. So as you know, I get about 100 emails from them a week, and I'm trying to distill everything that I get from them and read it down to what I think is most important for you to know. A lot of that has to do with what exactly I understand and what is actually relevant to us. So you will have an opportunity to get some of that information. I'm going to go through those updates fairly quickly. I'm going to kind of give you a preview of what's going to come next week. And then finally, last but not least, I am going to talk about what we saw in your class, and then we're going to take questions and answers. Okay? So the updates that you want to see, there is now the ability to be a single sign-in on all of the assessments, meaning not only for the field test, where you would normally sign in, but also on the practice test as well as the practice teacher, the test administrator screen. So if you look at the practice test, you know where the portal is, where the practice tests are, that is all available to be single sign-on now. Single sign-in means you sign in as yourself. Now, here's the big question. How many of you received your Tide password on Monday? Very good. Awesome. How many of you have gone in and given your own personal password and know how to sign into Tide now? Oh, you guys rock. If you haven't yet, you guys rock. Okay, I have to tell you, the webinar that I went to today, about 90% of the questions were about, my people can't get on. Why? And I started that last week. I started talking to people last week to figure out what I needed to do to make it so you could sign on easily. I'm glad it worked. You didn't get an email from them yet, or you haven't actually? I just haven't. Okay. Let me know if you have any problems. No, I just want to make sure you actually got the email because that means I did my part. And so as soon as everybody is up and running, that password is now your access point, not only when you do the field test, but it is also your access point now when you actually go through with your students and you want to do a practice session. The one thing I want you to start practicing with your students is how they sign on. Okay? And when they sign on, they're going to use, does anybody know what you want to use when you have them sign in?
SSID.
Before that, actually, when they first open the computer, instead of signing into Google Chrome, what are they going to do? They're going to launch the what?
Oh, the secure air server or whatever.
Exactly, the secure browser. So when you load the secure browser, when you're practicing signing in, you'll load the secure browser, and you'll still go to the practice session. You can't go to the actual field test. You won't create a session for them there. But now they can sign in as themselves, so you can see them pop up on your screen when you're working as a test administrator. You don't have to go through the entire practice test unless you want to. If you want to have them experience what it feels like to take the test before they actually take the test, that's fine. Remember we said last week that that's not a requirement anymore. We don't want our students to be tested out by the time they take the test. That's one thing I want you to be careful of. However, you want to have them, give them the experience of going through it, say sometime end of next week, that's okay. Because you'll give them some breathing room in between, just so they have a sense of what it feels like to go through and manipulate everything. But one of the things I would like to see this week is that you go through and have your students practice signing in, and you practice signing in as a test administrator, and them signing in as a participant. Okay, and when you sign in, you'll have access to all the information that you need to allow them to sign in. Now remember, you cannot make their student ID numbers public. Okay? Do not don't project student ID numbers on the board. You have to give it to them individually. You can create a card for it, whatever it takes. Collect them at the end, tear them up, throw them away. Okay? You got to make sure that you keep that stuff safe, because if you don't and somebody finds out, you'll be in trouble. Not only that, but you want to protect the identities of our students. Okay? And that's very important. Questions about that? Okay, as always, you guys are awesome. The last thing that is the update is we are, you have access to the performance tasks now. You can take a look at them, go over them for yourselves. Please do not start presenting them to your students yet. We don't want to give our students any false, anything extra to help them. Remember, we don't get results for this anyways. And we want to treat it as much like the real thing as possible, which means you want to actually do this. That's okay. That was me for 3 days last week, so I understand. But we want to make sure that we keep it as close to what the real test environment feels like as possible. So you don't want to go ahead and do the student activity way ahead of time and repeat it again and repeat it again and repeat it again so they're really comfortable with it. You want to actually give it the day before that you actually do it. But this gives you a chance to get comfortable and take advantage of that. Feel free to go download your class activity, get to know your class activity. Are there questions about that? The last really big thing that came up today, as you know or may know, there's a lot of schools that have already done their Smarter Balanced Field Test. They are done with it. And there's been feedback pouring in, and that's why they held the webinar that they held today. And the #1 question that they got was, can we help students if they're struggling with the tools?
Oh.
And the answer is no. So once you have them start testing, the last thing you can literally help them do is sign in.
Or tie their shoe.
That is the end of it.
Use your judgment.
There's one other thing you can do for them if they ask you for help. You can point to the question mark in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. Outside of that, you can give them no other support. Okay, I want to be very, very clear about that. You may not give them any other support, which is why it's really important that you're getting them to start practicing with those item types. Those item types are going to be a very, very key part of making sure that they're ready. That's why we went through and did the graphic organizer you guys did, where you went in and found where you could find examples of each item type and make sure that your students were able to practice with them before they actually take the test. Because again, once the test is up and running, you will not be able to give them any help. Up until that day, you can give them as much help as you want. You can have them sitting with you. You can do all of those things. Okay? Questions about that? Okay, very good. All right, our next one, we're going to start talking about observations and feedback. And I forgot that I gave this little shiny pieces. But again, I'm only going to talk about the new things I saw. You guys are still doing a great job of keeping the goal in mind when you're talking about why students are getting the Chromebooks. You've done a very good job of establishing that the Chromebooks are tools. They're not toys. They're tools to use for the assessment and to do well on the assessment. You've also established very well that not only are these tools, but they are to be treated like they're a privilege. And so you've done a very good job of doing those things. This time, one of the things that we saw that was really good, that was an add-on from something that we saw last time, was there was clear evidence that you put in planning time to give your students time to talk to each other about the things that you're showing them. Okay, there's clear planning time for discussion, and that was very strong. In the modeling strengths, again, all of the same things you've been doing already that were already there in terms of modeling with the textbooks, modeling with yours for your students before they actually had an opportunity to touch the Chromebooks, all those things are still there. one of the things that we're seeing now is using the projector effectively to really model what the question pieces look like. And in some classrooms, we actually walked in and saw students were looking at questions and question types, and we're getting a very good model of that from their teachers before they had a chance to practice with it. And then last but not least, for practice, we saw, and this was one of the big things that we saw, a lot of you are incorporating a stations approach. And this is a really good way to do this, particularly because you're probably eating into your study hall time. And so one of the things that we saw is students doing study hall, working silently, and you pulling a small group and either using that as a way to assess them, making sure that they understand what they're doing, or to give small group instruction, and then rotating kids through so everybody gets a chance to see what's going on, and you get a very close view of what's happening in the classroom. So this is one of the things that we want to push with you. That use of small group instruction, that use of stations set up in your classroom is a really good way to go about doing this. And it's probably really a good way to make sure that your students are really truly getting this. And so that was the one thing that really stood out from what we saw the first time around. We did see some really good practice with the walking around. I saw a lot more of the verbalization that we talked about last time. So a lot of classes have chants about thumbs up, four fingers down, something along those lines. I don't know how it sounds, but you know. So I was very impressed with it. I also saw one really shiny poster, and I meant to put it in the PD, but I'm just going to have to show it to you because I forgot to do that, and I apologize. But in one of the classrooms, I saw this very excellent poster with an acronym that's using the word CARE to describe how we treat the Chromebooks. So this is that poster, and it looks really, really cool, and I will definitely add this to the slides at some point in the near future. It's not done yet. Good. There you go. Okay. And like I said, I will definitely put that in. I want to give credit where it's due. That was in Miss Williams' classroom. It was fantastic. And so, again, these are the things that we want to see. You're using the same strategies that you would use to teach any other routine in your classroom, but you're applying it to the Chromebooks, and that's really, really good. A couple even better ifs. One in particular is we've seen some very, very long lessons. Lessons that are 60 minutes to 80 minutes. Okay, we don't need you to take that long. 20 to 30 minutes is more than enough, okay? Please try and keep it within a small window. We don't want this eating into your other curriculum, which is particularly why we're talking about the use of those stations. That was something that I hadn't thought of, and that's why there's an amazing amount of brain power in this room, and it's an idea that I'm going to pluck right now and say, you should all use this. It's a really good way to make good use of your time, but also you get a very good view of what's happening with your students individually. It also means you don't necessarily have to practice signing out and signing back in. You could have 3 or 4 computers set up in front of you, make sure they all go in, and then go through that process. Questions about that? Any questions about that? Okay, very good. The other even better is, in some of the practice, we're still seeing as we're walking around the room, we're seeing treatment of the textbooks that are supposed to be like the Chromebooks not taken very seriously. And one thing I really want to talk about is when you're doing independent work, this is the best time to give immediate feedback. Don't wait until after. Go ahead and give the feedback right away. It doesn't have to be to the whole group. It can be individual, and you can just, if it's a walking, you can, pace the student that you're walking with and check with them. How are we supposed to be doing this? Make sure that they understand that this, even though it's a funny model and it's a textbook and it's not this really expensive Chromebook, it still is something that you need to treat like the Chromebook so you have the privilege of using the Chromebook. Okay? Questions about that? Okay. That is quite literally all I have. So we're into the question and answer session. My chair has disappeared, sadly. Oh, no, you don't. Oh, there. Thank you. Okay, so at this point, what I want to do is I want to take your questions, and I am going to go ahead and try to add them to the PowerPoint as you ask them. I'm probably going to let Joseph answer most of them, and I'll try and I'll try to answer, put the answers on the PowerPoint too, so that way we're meeting the needs of everybody who is with us right now.
Put my Chromebook into the projector, and I have an older projector. Maybe that's a separate.
No, that's okay. So that's good to know. Send me an email. I will get you an adapter. Don't do that. Don't do that. It should slide right in. If it doesn't slide right in.
Okay, so the first question is,
What happens when my cord doesn't fit the projector?
yes, happens if my cord doesn't fit. And the answer is,
It doesn't belong there.
it doesn't belong there.
Ask for
help.
There.
And there are some new
Ask
videos about
for-
connecting your desktops, your Chromebooks to the projector. So take a look at those. They should help eliminate questions, what you have to do on your screen, what you have to do to actually physically plug it in.
Right.
If you still have questions after that, let me know.
And the key is with it, this is if you have an older projector. If you have an older projector, it doesn't have an HDMI input.
All of our new ones.
So you'll need an adapter to plug it in.
And I'll
okay.
help you with that.
Okay? Any other questions?
Is there a simplified way to put things on the student Chromebook, the bookmark bar, or would that be something I would have to go individually and do to each student?
No, so what's nice is if you add a favorite to your grade level login, it is automatically synced to every Chromebook that logs in with that username. So what we're recommending is, since there's more than one, fourth grade, more than one fifth grade, create a folder on the bookmark bar with your name.
Right.
Inside there, load it up, organize it however you want, language arts, math, science, whatever activities you want. And then just train your students to find Mr. Atkins. Click on that. There's my list of everything I can go to.
Okay.
Do you have to be signed in as a student to do that?
Yes. So sign in on one, borrow a student one, sign in as a student, get it all set, it'll sync to everybody else.
Can you add another user to your Chromebook and sign in that way as a student?
Yes.
I've done that, and that's the way I do it. I just sign in on mine. I added a user account.
Yeah, you can add so on each Chromebook in the bottom left when you're on the sign-in page, you can add a user as long as they're a Fortune School user. To try to add a personal account, you will be denied. But yeah, you can add a student account on yours, that way your students can use your Chromebook as well.
Even if I load up what you just said and I load up stuff that I want to do for my lessons, is there a folder on the bar? But if you didn't put it on the list to have access to it,
You won't have access. So if you're adding it to the favorites, and it's not on the whitelist, you will need to add it to the whitelist or it will not work. The whitelist is exactly what our students can access. If it's not there, they can't get it.
So I also noticed on the network test that they did that they had access to most of it, but then my kids clicked on something so they went to the network test and then it denied them access. So does that also mean that I not only have to put the actual website, but then...
Just the main web address will work.
Okay.
So what happens is if you allow, for example, GambinoEducation.com, my students can still get to GambinoEducation.com/students. I don't have to add every single unique address. The main domain is what it looks for. And then from there, we're good. Now, what happens sometimes, though, is while those activities, because all those activities they were trying were Flash activities, if they right-clicked and chose anything else, it's going to try to take them to a page that they don't have access to. And that's something I've noticed a lot with my students is they accidentally right-click and they click on something that tries to take them to Adobe's website. But then we don't have them have access to Adobe's website, so it says content blocked.
Yes,
You're not recording, right?
I am absolutely recording.
You are?
Yeah.
Okay, then we'll just have some.
No,
Do a
ask.
voice modulator. Just whisper it in
It'll be
someone
much
else's
better.
ear, and then I'll say it in a funny voice.
Okay, I am not used to being in this position, but I suck at this. I do. I mean, my kids get smarter balance, they understand the questions,
I understand how to do that, but like yesterday, it was a hot mess when we were trying to sign on to the to do the infrastructure thing. All of our computers, like, they had to sign in with an email address, and we didn't know that, and a password, and we didn't know that. And it's on me.
Yeah.
I get that. I am not your tech person.
Right.
I'm Sea Lion. Yes. Okay. Computer. No. I don't know why.
So here's the thing. We saw that it's not just you.
Well,
And so let's start with that. It's not just you, and you shouldn't feel like it's just you. To start with, the next step is
I'm not used to
part of
sucking. It's really frustrating.
No, and it's not that, and it's not that you suck. It's more that we are going. There's a steep learning curve here.
This is new.
Our students have access to things they've never had access to before, which means some of the stuff we didn't think all the way through in terms of the infrastructure test. And so part of that's on me because I had to go through and do the logistics for the infrastructure test, and I had never done them before. So it was my first time through, and I tried to give as much information as I could think of, and there were still things that came up, and there were a lot of things that came up. And so a lot of that is, it's on me. It's not your fault, it's my fault, because I was the one that put together the infrastructure test. What we learned from it, we'll take into next time. And so one of the things that we can do for sure next time is we'll have a routine in place for how do my students sign in? How do my students sign into the Chromebooks? What am I going to do to make sure all of my students can sign in at the right time and in a fairly quick way? Now, part of that is if you're on a computer that's not actually assigned to your classroom, that means you had to add a new user account, which was a huge struggle for almost everybody in every single classroom that I walked into. And that was here. And I can only imagine what it was like at Fortune School, or what it's going to be like at Allen Rowe, and maybe it'll be better at Allen Rowe because we learned from them. But at the same time, it was a learning experience. So I know now that we need to basically, create a moment, a routine. So my directive to you is to create a routine, but also I need to be able to show you how to add a user account, because we haven't shown you how to add a user account.
That would be so awesome.
I agree, and I'm so sorry we didn't.
Oh,
But
and
that's not the, and again, that's why we're having these meetings. Again, a lot of this is all brand new. Remember, the reason why this is a field test is not only for the state to troubleshoot all of their issues. Guess who else is getting to troubleshoot all of his issues right now? This guy right here. And there's a lot there's a lot of stuff going on, and trust me, I am trying to disseminate as much of it as I can. I am trying to think ahead of it as much as I can. Some of this stuff I've just never seen before. And so I apologize. I really am sorry for those of you that had a rough day because of it yesterday. I want to thank you for the effort you put into pushing through it. And I do mean that in the biggest possible way. When I was here yesterday, you guys were the calm in the center of the storm, even though I was literally running up and down stairs for an hour. I did 60 laps on the stairs yesterday. There was no need to get on the elliptical last night when I got home. But what I was able to do is I was able to walk into a classroom, and as stressed out as I felt, as soon as I walked in, there was a great amount of calm. And that was because of the work you guys were doing in your classroom. Your students were paying attention, they were focused, they were working hard, they were patient. And that's a product of the work that you guys do with them. So you deserve a huge pat on the back for that. So go ahead and give yourselves a pat on the back for that.
Yay.
Give each other a pat on the back for that. Because you guys had to go through that learning process with us too. And there was no way for us to do it without actually doing it. That was one of those situations where we just had to, pull the string. And I'm really, I'm fortunate because we have such a great staff. You guys did such a good job. Yeah.
I've lost the whitelist. I
I'll
don't
give it to
know
you in a
that.
second. I'll send it back to you.
Okay, because I was literally on it every day, and then one day I tried to get on there, I couldn't find it, and I haven't been able to find it, and it's bothering me.
It's in instructional materials, shared resources. It should be there. If it's not, someone else has accidentally moved it, and I'll track where it is because it gives me a
Shared
report
resources?
when
Sure.
things are moved.
Yeah,
You're gonna share
no.
it with me?
No. Well, yeah. Originally, it's under shared. I'll take a look.
Okay, and I can never find your. Remember you said you made PowerPoint or you made something?
Oh, the slides, the,
Yeah, I
it's,
cannot find them.
it's in a student login.
Oh,
Do you know login drive?
because that's, I did the same thing, so there's more slides.
Students have access to the same Google apps that we do. So they have a drive for 5th grade, for 3rd grade, and they have a shared space that if you sign in as a student, you can organize that space for them. Something I recommend is from your teacher account, share a master folder with your grade level login, because then you have control from your account over what's going into that folder, and so you'll be able to see everything that's dropped in there because it's automatically then shared with you as soon as a student even adds it in that folder or creates something in that folder.
I do not get it. Okay, I really feel like you guys are speaking French.
So your questions help drive the videos that we're creating.
Okay.
Do you find those helpful on the Tech Talk site?
I do.
We're trying to keep
Yes.
them short, and I'm trying to create them only for what you guys direct. So when you guys have a question, I'll answer it, but then I'm also creating a video that you can go back and check and see. Part of this is technology is not something you memorize. It's not something that you're great with all the time. It's not. If I could give you video of the trials that I've had trying to use the tech in my classroom, you'd feel a lot better. We've had a lot of ups and downs. It takes time.
Yeah.
I didn't plan for everything that we've seen and has happened in my classroom. It happens first. Then I go back and I make a plan to fix it so it doesn't happen again.
I think it's making me feel old.
No. There is no, and that's what I love about this is there is no age limit on who can use these tools. It's just it comes down to, do you have the drive to learn it?
Oh, I totally
And then you're fine. That's the hard part. If you don't have, if you have the drive, we're good.
Is the in what you this is a specific thing on what we were just talking about. The new films that you're gonna make with
New videos.
Tech Talks
Mhm.
and the procedure that you're going to outline for us, will that include the students signing in
So
and logging in as themselves?
Mhm.
And then there was something someone said, a student account and
So right now the
Will it
student
include
accounts
that?
are very generic.
Okay.
And so what I recommend is that you have them set up ahead of time so that students aren't having to worry about signing the Chromebooks. Because once an account has been added,
Mhm.
they don't need to know the email address anymore.
Right.
All they need to know is the password. They click on the 5 or they click on the 4 because there's a picture set for each account. And then that way, it's a lot easier. Adding the account, yeah, it's a little more difficult. That's something I recommend that teachers set up in advance on the Chromebooks. Now, with this testing environment, we're going to have to look at possibly having it so that every account is added to every Chromebook, but that is not something that you would take care of. So we'll have a conversation around that. Because that's what I'm thinking would be the easiest solution, but it's also a lot of work because you got to touch every Chromebook. So we'll see. But we want, for right now, we want you to know how to add an account. So we'll have a video to show you that.
whatever it takes.
Did you make this? No, this one here.
No, your team did.
Thanks for being
Maybe I
patient.
should have that.
of course, that's why we're here. That's one of the big reasons why we're here. Other questions?
Yeah.
Do you have the, maybe I didn't read far enough, but when you go into your Smarter Balance and your new whatchamacallit password, the secure browser you're talking about is accessible through that, right? It has a window that says secure browser.
Yeah, so in your Chromebooks, when you open the Chromebook, you have the normal account that you sign in the normal way, and at the bottom on the left-hand side,
Bottom left.
left-hand side, you'll see there's another application to launch.
Yeah.
If you click the launcher, it'll bring up the SecureSoft, the Air Secure.
So do that from your
Is
side.
it the left side? I think it's the left. But and then that'll launch it. on testing days, and I'm working on like a way to make this happen. A routine. Again, this is another routine that I'm definitely starting to think about myself. And if you're interested in or good at creating student routines, I might want to talk to you. I could definitely use some support here myself. In terms of how we're going to make sure the computers are already signed into the servers before the testing window starts. That's really going to be sort of the big thing that we want to make sure happens, because on testing day, the last thing you want is students to not be on the right server, students to not be where they need to be. You really just want them, hey, all you need to do is plug in your SSID and your password, and then that's it. Because once they're there, everything else runs pretty smoothly. Once they're there, you'll have, it runs basically on its own. The students will have the opportunity to choose whichever assessment they're supposed to be taking, and you're going to tell them which one you want them to start with, and then they're going to get going on it. And from that point on, it's very flexible. It's literally student by student. So if one student takes 3 hours to finish the ELA test and the other one takes an hour, if they finish that hour ahead of time, and you say, let's say you have an hour window, and you can say, okay, this testing session's over. At like the 10-minute mark, you might say, okay, we're about to end the session, so go back and check any work that you've done during the session, because after the session ends, you won't be able to go back and check the session anymore, right? And then you'll let them check their work, they'll put in any last changes that they make, and you'll end the session. When you open the next session, wherever the student left off is where they start again. So that means that student that didn't finish as much as the student that, like, they have the time they need to get finished. And that's how we're going to set up the testing schedule. For all schools except for Allen Rowe, you are the only person giving the test, so you can set your schedule however you want. Literally. Like, whatever works best in your class will be fine. For everybody else, we have a 3-week window that we're going to give the test during. And basically what I've set up and what I'm working on with your principals right now is that all grade levels will get a 3-hour window to take the test every day for the first 5 days straight. And then the second week you'll get 3 days to do the performance task. And then the third week will be makeup time. Students that didn't finish the non-performance task will be able to work on it if they need to. Students that did finish it won't have to. You can probably identify people on your campus who can give the test to the students who need it at that point for the makeup week. Okay? The idea really is that students are driving the drivers of the, once they get into the testing environment, they're the drivers. You're not driving it very much. One thing we're going to do is we're going to give a rough outline of ELA should probably be done in this window. Okay? And if they're not done in this window in this number of days, we're going to go ahead and start the math, because we want everybody to, because a lot of your students are going to finish exactly when you think they will. They'll take the test for 3 hours and they'll be done. And they'll be done with that portion of the test, and they'll be ready to move on to the next portion of the test the next day. For those students, we want to be able to make sure that they have a defined window. And then everybody else that doesn't finish in those windows, we can just send them, you can set up a testing session for them somewhere else that's not in your class, that's not interrupting your normal instruction. You'll be able to go back to your normal instruction as soon as the assessments are done. Okay? Yeah.
So I know in my class that I might have the opposite issue, that I'll have some kids that will take the whole 3 hours, and then I'll have some kids that will take 1 hour.
Yeah.
And then they'll have to sit there for 2
Yeah.
until the session ends.
Yep. So what you're going to want to do is, when you have a 3-hour, and you're a 5th grade class, so yours is actually broken up into a 2-hour block and a 1-hour block every day, because of where your lunch falls and where your yoga time falls. So because you have a 2-hour block and a 1-hour block, you might say, okay, everybody gets the first 2 hours, and even if you finish early, in the 2-hour block, you're going to have to spend whatever extra time you have going back and checking your answers anyway. But when we get to that 1-hour block in the afternoon, everybody who finished everything that they were supposed to finish, meaning they finished all of the ELA tests or all of the math tests, whichever one you decided to get first. Okay, everybody who finished all of that part, you are now not in testing mode anymore. And we're going to work on seeing how we can figure that out. That's part of the conversation I have to have with principals on Friday. I'm meeting with site principals, site coordinators on Friday to really kind of really break this out so we know exactly what it should look like. And that's perfectly okay if your class is different. The reason why there's literally 15 hours to take both of the non-performance tasks is because we know we have some students who take that much time. It's not supposed to take that long. It's supposed to take 2 3-hour blocks and a 2-hour block. So we've got literally twice as much time in just the first week. We still have 2 weeks after that too, where there's time available to give the assessment if we need to. Okay? Yeah.
Part feedback and part question.
Okay.
I think the general feedback at Fortune yesterday was we don't have bandwidth.
Yes, absolutely.
So my question is, are we going to get
Yes. So that, to my knowledge, and I don't have a lot to say about this. This is our tech people and Michelle working together. There is definitely going to be increased bandwidth. How that's going to happen, I'm not necessarily sure of yet. The date that that's supposed to happen is approximately the 15th, from what I've been told. And so I think by the 15th we'll have some answers. What that probably means is sometime between the 15th and the start of testing, we're probably going to have to do a second infrastructure test. There will be some things that we have to. There will be there will be some things that will be changed for immediately going in. The first thing I know that I'm going to change, and I know this, we can't change it for Hardy Brown or Allen Rowe right now. We're going to kind of go with it. But the next time we do this, we're not going to have the assessment at the end of the day. It's going to be closer to the beginning of the day because we're going to eliminate the foot traffic that became the main concern of William Lee. I don't know if that was a concern at Fortune School, but at William Lee we had hundreds of parents walking through the halls while we were moving Chromebooks back and forth. It was a security issue. And I was definitely concerned that we were losing Chromebooks. Even though you guys were doing a great job, it was just poor planning on my part. So we're going to fix that going forward. You're also going to, we'll talk about that routine for signing in. Before we do the next infrastructure test, when we have this meeting that's coming before the next infrastructure test, I'll have a routine ready to go. Whether I have to develop it or I have some people jump in and help me, I would love that, because some of you do routines way, way better than I used to. And so I would definitely take advice on that, just in terms of how do we get students to know what to do when they sign in, and what are the steps they're going to take, okay? And how are you going to make sure they all sign in at the same time and are actually signed in and checking in on them? Because part of the problem we know is they can't actually type, right? So it takes them a little bit longer, especially when you're talking about the and sign or the at sign, right? So that's something that we have to continue to work on and continue to make sure everything is moving. Questions? Okay. Are there any other questions I can answer for you before we wrap up for the day? I want to again say thank you for the work that you guys are doing. You've done an amazing amount of good work in classrooms as we are going through this process. It is a learning process. There is a learning curve. And like any learning curve, for some people it's steeper than others. And that's okay. That doesn't mean we can't attack it. And attack it with what we always do. We always do our best. It's just like we ask our students to do. If you put the best effort you can forward, we will support you as much as we can. If you have the will, we'll help you get the skill. Okay? All right. I am done. Did you guys want to add anything to it? Did I miss anything today? All right. Mr. Gambino, any parting thoughts before we're done?
Just keep the feedback coming and keep asking questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions, whether on a Hangout or an email. And like I said, if I don't have an answer for you right away, I will get you an answer. No problem.
Okay. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon. Did you have one more question? Or, okay. Excellent. Have a great afternoon.